Well, folks, I guess we'll get started here. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And thanks for our distinguished guests and speakers here today to mark this occasion. It's really a special day where the U.S. Army formally transfers this world-class collection to the National Park Service. And the Park Service has been here for about 40 years taking care of this collection. And it's an old collection that has been on this site for about 150 years. And it tells the story of Springfield Armory and local history, and just really deep, amazing collection. And we are more than pleased to have all of our guests with us to mark this occasion. And as such, we'll get started with our special distinguished speakers. And first, I'd like to introduce our congressman from the 1st District, Richard E. Neal. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Alex. And a word of congratulations to Alex and to James Woolsey for the extraordinary work that they do here every single day. And I was talking this morning with a radio talk show host, and I was going back and forth on the significance of this announcement and pointing out that Ken Burns summed it up correctly when he said the National Park Service was America's best idea. And anybody who's had a chance to travel through the national parks and to witness them and to see them, we understand that we are the latest custodians of that remarkable legacy, and the consistent infusion of public resources to ensure that succeeding generations have the opportunity to utilize them ought to be in the forefront of much of the public debate as it relates to public expenditure. And of course, to the mayor, is a great advocate, Gerald OKeefe, and again to James Woolsey and the staff. Just a couple of moments, because I've had an interest in this. This site was born of controversy. And it was Secretary McNamara's decision in about 1965 and 1966 to announce the closure of the Springfield Armory. The Armory had been established by General Washington, and it was called the Arsenal at Springfield. And perhaps his most favored pupil, Henry Knox, and the Knox Trail, which is on State Street and commemorated by the marker as such, is the opportunity for Knox to have carried cannon from Ticonderoga on his way to Dorchester Heights for what was arguably the first big victory of the American Revolution. And what's significant about that victory is that Washington arrived, Knox arrived, and the British had vacated Dorchester. And of course, in any good military conflict, General Washington immediately announced victory, even though they'd been long gone. And it helped propel much of the enthusiasm for the engagement of the American Revolution. And State Street, as you recall, has also been Franklin's mail route, the Boston Post Road, which is also significantly marked. Shays' Rebellion took place but feet from here. And it was the former members of General Washington's army who attacked the Arsenal at Springfield. And that's a very important footnote to the argument as well. But when you consider the many great things that happened on this site, and I remember some of the names, Boland and Sullivan and DeLiso and Garvey. Those were the names that were part of that dispute at the time when the state was trying to figure out what to do with the property that they owned, and the dividing line was really that little roadway here in front of the museum. And I remember the announcement here on the green at the Commandant's home when the Park Service was formally acknowledged and the state was willing to cede some of this property. On the 3rd floor here, there used to be a full gymnasium. I've had a chance to see it, and today I understand that's where the work that the curating staff takes place. And I think that James has been a terrific promoter of this site. And as you stare down where I'm speaking to your backs is another important part of armament history, and that's keeping the peace. And that's what we commemorate by looking at the famous Longfellow gun rack. He was here on his honeymoon, visited the site, saw the gun rack, and wrote about the famous organ that he inspired in terms of its peaceful fulfillment. I had a chance as a young man to participate in many events here, and never to miss the event that perhaps was one of the most important, and that was acknowledging the role that the Springfield Rifle had played in American history, but also the role that John Garand had played in the success of American history with the construction of the Garand rifle. And I know that they're going to allow the press to see, I hope, one of those commemorative pieces. John Garand lived around Vermont Street, over in the Forest Park section. And he sought no fame or fortune, but he didn't need to. George Patton said that it was perhaps the invention that transformed and changed the course of World War II. A simple man, simple citizen of Springfield, who invented the Garand rifle. So I think today, another long-standing disagreement, I won't call it a dispute, between the United States Army and the National Park Service. And the Park Service is going to become the custodian of the commemoration of much of this weaponry. So this is a very significant day in any and all of its aspects. Never to forget what happened on this site to change the course of world history. And its commemoration demonstrates once again what a great memory that America has. So to the staff here, a word of thanks and congratulations from the United States of America.
Thank you, Congressman. Up next, we've got Mr. Gerald OKeefe, who is Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Army.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, and let me tell you a little bit about what I do here. As Alex said, my title is the Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Army, and on a day-to-day basis, what that really means is I help the Secretary kind of run the corporate headquarters of the Department of the Army and the Pentagon. But in addition to that, the Army's Center of Military History and all of the Army's museums and its historical program report to me as the administrative assistant. So on behalf of the Secretary of the Army, I'm certainly honored to be here today on this important occasion. And I'm also originally from Massachusetts. I'm originally from Medford, Massachusetts, so not too far down the road. But I've been to Springfield many times, but I've never been to this site. So Alex gave me a great tour for about 2 hours this morning to see the amazing and historical holdings that are here. So again, on behalf of the Secretary of the Army and the entire United States Army, we are certainly pleased to be here today to recognize this important event and to acknowledge the transfer of all these artifacts and weapons to the National Park Service. Thank you, Congressman Neal, for being such a big supporter of the Springfield Armory National Historical Site and a major champion of this important effort, and for demonstrating that with your personal presence here today. Mayor Sarno, also thank you for your commitment to this site. And to our friends in the National Park Service, Mr. Woolsey and Ms. Stevens, thank you for the tremendous care that you have taken of this truly historic collection over many, many years and, in fact, decades. And thank you all, again, for the tour of this amazing facility. It really is the weapons, the artifacts, the lathe that's behind me really are an amazing history of the United States Army, of the Department of Defense, and of this country. And as I mentioned, I do sincerely want to pass on the gratitude of the United States Army to the National Park Service and its foundation, the Springfield Armory Alliance, for preserving not only this collection, but this site. Of course, I don't have to tell you how significant the designation of a National Historic Landmark is, and what a benefit it is for not only the Park Service and the Army, but the nation as a whole. While the Army has much in terms of its collections, in terms of its thriving collections and historical capability, and we are very proud of it, it's also great to have partners like the National Park Service, particularly in instances such as this where the Army no longer owns the property. This ground and the people that worked here are such a central part of the nation's history that the story of our country can't be told without them. You all understand this even better than I do, but the nearly 7,000 artifacts, including over 5,000 firearms that the Army is entrusting to the Park Service as a collection, is truly priceless. Transferring these artifacts to you, the experts who have the knowledge, but also the passion to care for them as no one else could, also eliminates duplication of administration and reporting. It's a best practice from a curatorial and historical perspective, and it is a win-win for both the Army and the National Park Service. The decision to formally transfer the weapons housed in this amazing facility is a testament to the faith and confidence that has accrued in the Army for everyone involved in this effort over the years. That's a faith and confidence that's born the obvious dedication and professionalism that you and those before you have shown for more than a century. It's also, frankly, just the logical and efficient thing to do. The transfer is also a testament to the foresight of those who lived and worked here in the distant past, that this armory and now this museum has existed as a museum since 1866, 1 year after the Civil War. And it's a testament to everyone here today that it will continue to operate to educate and inspire many generations into the future. Thank you so much for helping to tell the Army story in such a profound and meaningful way for all these years and into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And by the way, the 2-hour tour was the short tour. I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor Domenic Sarno.
Good morning. You know, I always love listening to Congressman Neal when he waxes very historic. And I know he mentioned that Longfellow was here for his honeymoon. Not too romantic, I'll tell you that. To my colleagues in government, the City Councilor Jesse Letterman, City Councilor Kateri Walsh, City Councilor Melvin Edwards, who plays a pivotal role here also. Thank you for being here. To Congressman Neal, who has always fought ferociously when it comes to the historic content of not only the nation, but the city of Springfield. To Mr. O'Keefe, to Superintendent Woolsey, James, and your team. Nothing against any other leaders prior to you, but the Congressman alluded to is absolutely right. You have done an outstanding job in promoting the Armory here, and you deserve a big round of applause. Your co-workers here, too, look like they could do Civil War enactments also with their beards. And it's great to see Carl Steele here, too. He was one of the all-time greats baseball players out of Howie Burns Tech High School. And with the Red Sox, too. Minor league franchise. So if you need somebody to be a runner and quick, he can fly. This is historic, as the Congressman had mentioned, too, with Ken Burns, a documentary on our national parks, but from the U.S. Army transferring over to our national parks. When I was a kid, out of the High School of Commerce, I received a historic award, and I remember they gave me a dictionary, Merriam-Webster, and it was the John C. Garand History Award. And going back to the rifle that was created here in the city of Springfield, and as General Patton had said, had helped win World War II. I think many times when you look at urban America now, many times urban America is cast in negative light. And many places in urban America now, we're redefining ourselves. And it's almost that term of back to the future. And this is a hidden jewel that's here. And this is going to be part of our promotions as we market the city of Springfield, not only in the area and regionally, but as we go south to the Connecticut area, and as we go west to the New York area, and as we go east to the Boston, Worcester area, and as we go up to the New England area. But I think people, for the first time when they walk in here, marvel at, wow. And they say, Springfield, Massachusetts? And I'll say many a times to them, that's right, General Washington. The armaments here helped the birth of America. The armaments here helped to bring democracy and peace across the world. And people will still say, Springfield, Massachusetts? You know, we are rich in history, and if you go to the museum, another museum, Lyman and Marywood Museum of Springfield History, we're the home of 50 to 52 innovations and inventions right here in the city of Springfield. And sometimes I think, you know, we forget about that. So it's time that we have to be, in a respectful way, in-your-face type attitudes, and let people know about the significance of the Armory and the part it played not only for this area, but for the birth of a country and really for the world, right here in Springfield, Massachusetts. So to each and every one of you involved, I thank you for your continued dedicated efforts as we get the word out, and I know we're doing some restructuring here on the physical plant and landscaping of the Stick campus. But this is right in our backyard, and you know, having the congressman here and the U.S. Army representative, Mr. O'Keefe, is important. a major transfer that dates back to the 1700s, right here in Springfield, Massachusetts. So take the time to come by and take a look, and then spread the good word of all the good things that are going on in Springfield, and especially the role we continue to play and have played when it comes to the history of the United States of America and the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And up next is our own superintendent, James Woolsey.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's a pleasure to have everybody here. Congressman Neal, our friends from the U.S. Army, Mayor Sarno, city councilors. I think that we are blessed at the site to have so many people who care about us and look after us. So we definitely appreciate all that you do for us. What became the Springfield Armory started as a military storage depot by the U.S. Army, as was stated in 1777. In 1794, the third U.S. Congress, President George Washington, authorized the Springfield Armory to manufacture small arms for our nation's defense. The Army was a federal center for development and research for the U.S. military from that time until the Vietnam War. That's really amazing to think about. The Springfield weapons influenced battlefield tactics and wartime strategy from the War of 1812 through the Vietnam War. Armory inventions and industrial processes really made their way into the Industrial Revolution in the 19th and 20th century. You know, a lot of times people talk about the Springfield and Hartford in the 19th century as a Silicon Valley of its day. And you think about all the spin-off industries that happened here. So one historian has said to me that if one of 50 American investments by the U.S. government turned out as well as the Springfield Armory, that they would be worth it every time. And that's really what led to some of the phenomenal things that happened here. In recognition of the site's importance, the Springfield Armory was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1960 and was administratively listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1966. The Springfield Armory National Historic Site was authorized in 1974 by Congress and became a unit of the National Park Service in 1978. Today we welcome visitors from all over the world. And in fact, of our visitors, well over half come from outside the area. So you know, we not only are something that's keeping our history alive, but we're adding to the local economy. The U.S. Army, they established the historic Benton Small Arms Collection here at the Springfield Armory in 1866. Think about that for a minute. The core collection opened as a public museum in 1871, so just after the American Civil War. The collection, however, was far more than just a public collection or a museum. Employees at the Armory used this collection like a reference library. So when John Garand needed to learn something, he'd come here and he wouldn't check out a book, he'd check out a gun, right? And he would take that gun apart like engineers in the Armory had done for decades. Imagine the geniuses who came and used this facility really to create conditions that helped us win victory in World War II. So it was absolutely phenomenal. This ceremony is important because it recognizes National Park Service ownership of the Benton Small Arms Collection. The National Park Service and the U.S. Army, through the Center for Military History, we have a long, complex history related to this collection. When the Department of Defense closed the Springfield Armory in 1968, Congress sought to keep the museum collection intact at Springfield. A bailout agreement was used to loan the collection from the U.S. Army to a private nonprofit museum. When that private nonprofit museum proved difficult to sustain, the massive Congressional delegation pushed for park establishment. The new national park was established in 1978, and after all conditions for authorization were met, including a cooperative agreement between the National Park Service and the Army, the park was created. The National Park Service has cared for these objects for more than 4 decades in a world-class facility, which we just took everybody upstairs and looked around, and it's really phenomenal. According to the latest DOI standards, frankly, the collection facility here is one of the best in the National Park Service, as well it should be, because this is one of the most important collections that are with the National Park Service. We truly thank our friends at the U.S. Army for helping us come to a final solution for this collections management. The Springfield Armory, both its firearms collections, and the site itself, will forever preserve and tell the story of the Army and the U.S. Army's role as a guarantor of our nation's defense. This site is a fabulous site, and it absolutely is a logical place for this firearms collection to be. So we thank everybody, but we especially thank the Army for making this possible.
And up last is Stephanie Stevens, who is the Chief Curator of the entire National Park Service and our special guest from Washington. Welcome, Stephanie.
Morning, everyone. I guess I'm the shortest of the group here. Well, I'm glad to see that it's warmed up a bit. I spent 18 years in Anchorage, and I'll tell you this past week in Washington, D.C., it was really, really cold. Again, as I said, I'm truly grateful to be here, and I'd like to thank Congressman Neal, the Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of Army, Mr. O'Keefe, Springfield Mayor Sarno, and Superintendent Woolsey, and all of you for joining us in commemorating the transfer of the historic Springfield Armory Museum collection from the U.S. Army Center of Military History to the National Park Service and Springfield Armory National Historic Park. As I've said, my name is Stephanie Stevens, and I have the honor of serving as the Chief Curator for the National Park Service. Currently, the National Park Service has 387 park units that have museum collections totaling over 176 million objects and archives. They represent disciplines such as archaeology, history, ethnology, and natural history type specimens. The National Park Service is part of the cultural and natural heritage of the United States. They represent ancient peoples of America, where they lived and what they made and used. They tell the stories of eminent Americans, including presidents and first ladies, as well as diverse communities. National Park Service objects include historic furnishings, personal belongings, archaeological artifacts such as arrowheads and ceramic vessels. They also include natural history specimens such as plants, fossils, animals, and countless treasures that are the missions of each individual park. The National Park Service is entrusted with preserving and protecting objects that recount and remember events and ideas that shaped this great nation, from Civil War to civil rights, from objects at Gettysburg and the USS Arizona Memorial, and the march from Selma to Montgomery. Our collections include such items as Martha Washington's wedding veil, President Abraham Lincoln's coat that he was wearing that fateful night in Ford's Theater, Thomas Moran's artwork that hung in the halls of Congress and was instrumental in establishing Yellowstone National Park in 1872. It includes the pen that was actually used to sign the Antiquities Act that created the National Park Service in 1816. And now it includes the 6,693 objects known collectively as the Benton Small Arms Collection that the U.S. Army Center of Military History has donated or transferred to the National Park Service. It's a huge deal, so thank you. We're so excited. So this transfer represents an excellent example of agencies working together for our nation's heritage. Similar to other National Park Service sites in the system, the military is embedded in the fabric of our mission here at Springfield Armory National Historic Site. The National Park Service is in the forever business, and we will preserve these objects on behalf of the American people so that our children's children can experience this collection. On behalf of the National Park Service leadership, I cannot thank the Army enough for transferring this collection to us. And we look forward to strengthening the partnership between the National Park Service and the U.S. Army Center of Military History. I'd also like to take a moment to personally thank Maria Capozzi, who is with the Army, for her hard work and dedication throughout this process. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to our distinguished panel of speakers. Thank you all for your interest and support over the years, and we look forward to many more years of wonderful things happening at this national park. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, sir.
Well, I think that now there's a clear understanding that the National Park Service should be the custodian of much of this extraordinary weaponry, including the Garand rifle, which transformed the outcome of World War II, as noted by General Patton. And John Garand lived amongst us right here in the city of Springfield. And also, as we're reminded, it's also about securing the peace. And Longfellow came here on his honeymoon, saw the famous gun rack, and wrote the poem that was transformative in terms of calling attention to what mayhem could be created, but also how it could be used for peaceful endeavors.
For the general public, there will be no differences whatsoever. Essentially what this was there was a bureaucratic controversy over who owned the collection. And so and the legislation was pretty clear that this was meant to be managed by the National Park Service, but there were times when the U.S. Army claimed ownership over the collection. And so essentially what this does is solves forever the issue of where the collection will be, and it will be here really where it belongs at the Springfield Armory National Historic Site. I think that one thing we would like to see happen at the Armory is for this site to be more known locally. Our visitation is about at 25,000 a year, and that is frankly a low level. And so one thing that we would like to do is promote the site and get more local people. An interesting thing, we find that we have a lot more visitors coming from outside than we do from the local area, so we'd love to get more locals to come in. Well, I think that when you look at the history of this site has been so important to the local area in so many ways. And one of those ways was, this was where the Garand rifle was invented. So this was incredibly important in our nation's defense. But the Springfield Armory was also the Silicon Valley of the 19th century. And so around Springfield Armory and then the firearms industry that grew, and then things like bicycle manufacturers and sewing machine factories, there was a period where Springfield and Hartford were the richest cities per capita in the United States. And the reason that happened was because of precision manufacturing, and that was here because of the Springfield Armory. So if we can help local people understand that, and actually that precision manufacturing is starting to revive and regenerate. So maybe we can make this place alive in the future economy of the region too.
When you have people that walk into this National Historic Site, the Armory, they walk in and they go, wow, City of Springfield. Urban centers now have been depicted in a negative light. And as we look to redefine urban centers around America, it's almost back to the future. But when you start talking with people and saying, General George Washington, the Armory, the Knox Trail, Ben Franklin's Mail Trail here, the John C. Garand, the rifles, brings back memories because out of the High School of Commerce I won a history award and they gave me a dictionary, Merriam-Webster, and it was a John C. Historic award. And I think when you look upon it and people see this, and sometimes they forget, Springfield's the home of the Lyman and Marywood Museum of Springfield History, 50 to 52 innovations and inventions right here in Springfield. And when you start to speak to people realizing the birth of America, the birth of a country, came from right here in Springfield, Massachusetts. The conflicts of the wars that we have been involved in, that we've won in the name of democracy and in peace, the armaments came right from here. So now, and I can't say enough about Superintendent James Woolsey. He's done a tremendous job in promoting this armory, and now with everything we have going on in the city of Springfield, for the history buffs that are coming into the city of Springfield, I think their attendance is really going to skyrocket moving forward. I also want to say thank you to Congressman Neal. He is a student of history. I always love listening to him as he waxes very historic, and having this go to the National Park Service. Everybody's seen Ken Burns' documentaries, and especially the National Park Service, of what we have here. So it's a special time, and I always enjoy being up on this campus area when we do the citizenship events. And also, I love growing up my father's barbershop, the big band music, the American Songbook, Music of Your Life, the swing bands. And they do something every year here commemorating when Benny Goodman played up here in 1943 for all the workers, armory workers at the time, and he played one of his famous songs, which was controversial back in the 30s, Sing, Sing, Sing. So Springfield's rich in history, and I'll go back to that tagline that it's back to the future. But this is a very special day when you get the U.S. Army and the National Park Service to agree and as we take this over. So please, people that are watching this from near and afar, take the time to come to the Armory, and you're going to, when you walk in and you move around, you're going to go, wow. And that's right. This is the Springfield that many people don't know.